or three new actually, sets of regulations to the Pension Fund Act come into play. The regulations will require retirement funds to have a suitable default investment portfolio in place for pre-retirement savings that is not excessively complex or unreasonably expensive. The default regulations are intended to improve members' retirement outcomes by ensuring that appropriate investment portfolio is in place for those members that do not select one. Let's get a little bit more clarity and understanding on all of this. We've got Andrew Davison, the head of advice at Old Mutual Corporate Consultants, in studio to talk to us about these new regulations. Good to have you. Welcome to Morning Live.
Thank you.
Okay, talk to me about what this means. I've read an intro that I'm struggling to understand. What exactly are default regulations?
Okay, so first of all, as we know, most of us find it a challenge to save for retirement.
Yes.
It is a challenging task. And these three regulations are really designed to try to help people to stay the course. So the first one that you mentioned in the intro is the investment strategy, which is really essential because if you don't have a good investment strategy in place, your savings aren't going to grow sufficiently. And really the key when we're talking about growth is above inflation. You know, inflation is the enemy when you're saving for retirement, because if you don't beat inflation by a meaningful margin, effectively your spending power declines over time because inflation eats into it. So that's the first one, is have people that are not making a choice inside the fund, are they getting into a good investment strategy that's going to deliver long-term growth? Okay. Then, as you said, there are three regulations, and the other two that aren't really mentioned in the intro. The first one is when people change jobs, they tend to take their savings and spend it on something that is not retirement related.
Yeah.
And what this is, one of the regulations is designed to do is to say, when people leave, let them just leave their savings in the fund that they left. So they don't have to find a financial planner, they don't have to go out into the financial services industry and try to find a product that might be suitable for them. They can just leave and their savings remain invested, and then they can access them when they retire. And then the third one, which is also very important, is when people do get to retirement, historically, particularly in defined contribution funds, people had a pot of money. But they had to then make decisions about how to use that pot of money to buy a pension, which is the monthly income that you're going to use to fund your lifestyle in retirement. And what we're saying here is this regulation says, give people appropriate options to convert that lump sum into a monthly pension.
Okay, so those are the three. And in your opinion, do you think that these are good regulations, good changes towards these retirement funds?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, I think all three of those are very key areas that make a very big difference. So if we can get those right, I think it'll make a difference in terms of the member outcomes. So in other words, the type of pension that people will be able to enjoy. But I think it's up to the retirement funds to do a good job. So the regulation is one thing. People need to implement the regulations. And the effective date was the 1st of March. And really we're saying, don't treat it as a tick box exercise. Do a good job, because if you do, you actually are going to make a big difference to the members of your fund.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. It really is. I mean, does it work the same for those in the public sector and the private sector, or is there a little bit of a difference there?
So there is a small difference. I mean, essentially, retirement funds are very similar. The major difference is if people think about the public sector, they think about the government employees pension fund, and that's really a defined benefits fund. So in other words, when the employee in the government sector gets to retirement, they have a certain promise of pension relative to the length of service that they had. That's a defined benefit fund. Most funds in the private space nowadays are defined contribution. There might still be defined benefit funds, but most of them are defined contribution. In other words, the contributions that you put in every month are defined, as the name suggests, not the benefits that you get out in retirement. So however those contributions grow, that's the amount of money you're going to have to work with in your retirement. And if your investments don't perform, you have less money, obviously. And that's why that investment strategy component is so important.
Very, very important. For those that are approaching or are newly retired, does it affect them in any way?
So yes, I think most members in funds are affected by the regulations, depending on where they are in terms of their time horizon and where they are in terms of their investments. They might be more or less affected by one of the three regulations. The one that will affect those people that are approaching or close to retirement is the one about annuity. So in other words, buying that pension. the key thing there is that people need to need to be made available certain options. So in other words, annuity products.
Yeah.
And the other thing that's important is they need to be well communicated with as they head for retirement, so that they can prepare accordingly. And it shouldn't just be at the date of retirement the first time you hear about your options. It needs to be before you get there, so that you can plan accordingly.
So with these regulations, are there new retirement products that are going to be available to us now?
So that's an interesting question. I mean, essentially, some of them. So the first one, the investment strategy, the default, that's not new. Retirement funds have always had to have a default for people who don't make a choice. That doesn't mean that you can't make a choice in funds. So some funds make choice available in terms of the investment. But if people aren't comfortable or don't have the wherewithal or the knowledge to make a choice, there needs to be a solid default that captures their investment savings and grows it appropriately. But once we then talk about the annuity space, those annuity products have always been available, but they're in the retail space. Retirement funds have never had to worry about them. So trustees and members of a retirement fund generally didn't focus on the post-retirement phase. They only focused on the accumulation phase. So it's new for the retirement industry, but not new in the sense that they've always been available, but in the retail space. So I think what's important, though, is that I hope that this new regulation will spur some innovation in this space, so that we get better annuity products that can better serve people's needs.
Oh, interesting. Well, it'll be quite obviously a step in the right direction. That we've heard from Andrew Davison, Head of Advice at Old Mutual Corporate Consultants, is talking to us about the new regulations that are around the Pension Funds Act. They came into effect on the 1st of March. So, yeah, just check in on them if you've actually forgotten that they're going in. And to be honest with you, you've given me a little bit of food for thought as well. I better go and look into it too. So thanks so much for the advice and for talking.